Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Travis Sylvester, and today is a video you won't want to miss. Today we're going to be jumping into some details, but before we get into that, I just kind of want to put a disclaimer to you guys. We're trying to set the tone for this channel to be getting the small guy that's in his garage to 100%. We're not looking really for the guy that just is okay with an 80% good, okay car. We're trying to get the guy to 100%. And ultimately, if you're happy with 80%, that's perfectly fine. But who we're really trying to drive home on making these things the details that matter is the guy who really wants to pay attention to all the stupid little things that are going to take everything that you do through this entire next build to the next level. I want you guys to pretend that this 56 gasser is in the painted, we just are putting it back together, and you're running into all of these different issues, okay? You guys have spent all this time body working, and you just can't figure out why when you put it together the first time and then you took it apart and now you're painted putting it back together, why things are not aligning. A lot of times guys don't take those extra steps in the very beginning to make sure that everything is set correctly. So let's just say maybe it's a hardtop, maybe it's a convertible. These things vary, and there's a lot of things to take into consideration. Did you brace the body during rotisserie? Did you put new body mounts in? Did you use the hardware that you're going to use at the end? Did you record how many spacers you put in every single bolt in that front end? All of those things you guys will come to find if you are putting your car together for the final time and you didn't track those, you are going to have the biggest headache that you're going to fight. And then you're going to have chip paint and all those issues, and that's why I say on a slate, a lot of those guys end up around the 80% mark. It's okay, but then they find some blemishes that they can just live with. Guys, let's get you dialed in on what are the things you need to do. Today, we're going to talk about body mounts and how it affects your car, the hardware that goes into it. And the reason that I want you guys to pretend that this is a painted car, we are going to go over this stuff as we finish these different projects. But currently, like for example, we have a lot of different builders that we do sheet metal and just body and paint for. And depending on the builder, they all do it a little differently. Some are more meticulous than others. But I can tell you guys as a baseline, if you're going to start doing body work, because I have people asking questions, should I be doing the body work while it's on the rotisserie? Should I be doing the body work while it's on the chassis? This car's been sitting here for 20 years. Can I just start jumping into doing floor pans and body work and all these things? Well, what happens is you start finding that things may not fit perfect, so you start modifying things, and at that time you think, we're good to go. I got that floor in, not a big deal, it all fits. But then when it comes to the final and now you just fit the doors and the front clip and things aren't fitting, it's because of those details. Down to the torque of the body mounts. So I would say we talked about what we're doing with the 61 Impala, which is it's all sealed up in epoxy right now. We're waiting on some parts to come in. We have a long lead still. We thought we were going to get a chassis from Roadster Shop next month, and we're actually not going to get it till around November. So we're going to be talking to you guys about different things in the interim of that car. Now, this 56 Chevy has it's a gasser, it's already been caged. We didn't do the cage, another shop did. However, some of the things you need to think about is you can't just start putting the cage in the car and tie it all into the chassis without making sure that you have the doors, the fenders, the hood, the trunk. Everything needs to be sitting on brand new body mounts. And then when we talk about the body mounts, a body mount typically has a large washer, the urethane bushing, a sleeve that goes through the chassis, and then another bushing with a washer. Now, again, if you're just slapping things together, or maybe you're missing a part and you didn't put that one washer that might only be, very minimal in thickness, But the thing is, if you have inconsistencies side to side, maybe the mounts aren't right, or maybe you just didn't adjust your subframe correctly, I would say you always want to put the whole car together loosely. For example, we just cut the floor out of the 61 because of all the cancer, and we're going to remake it around the Roadster Shop chassis anyway. So what I want you guys to think about is getting all of those parts in the beginning. The main things to get you aligned. For example, door hinges. Make sure you have door hinges that are either rebuilt or replaced. You got the hardware that you guys want to use. You have the drivetrain that you want to use, as well as, I always tell people, if you're going to do a car and restore it to a very high quality, you technically need to build the car twice. We like to clean them, get them in epoxy, get them on the chassis, get them loosely assembled, drivetrain, whatever it is you're going to run. That way you know, hey, we need to delete these holes on the firewall. Hey, we need to move and modify our door gaps. Adjust everything loosely, and also don't just jump right into adjusting door gaps and cutting and welding things. You might have something that's off. So if you have torque specs that you need to follow, there are books out there that you guys can get per the manufacturer of your vehicle, and they all kind of vary. Typically on like these Tri-5s, if it's a hard top and not a convertible, you're between 25 and 35 pounds of torque. And if it's a convertible, you're only at 10 to 12 pounds of torque. So all of those things kind of matter, but ultimately, if you looked at this car as a straight line, I want you guys to visualize what those body mounts are doing to your door gaps. Let's just say, excuse me, you didn't put all those new body mounts in, and you did the body work. And then when the car came apart, you were like thinking, you know what, hey, I'm going to put the body mounts in at the end so it's easier and it's cleaner. I don't have to do that in the beginning. If you spent the time watching our other videos on how we gap and how we weld panels in, if you did all that in the beginning and then at the end you put body mounts in and you didn't track the spacers, all of those panels are never going to get to that mirror finish. We get people asking, do we weld the doors? And no, it's body filler that we lock in. Putting weather strip, we buy 2 sets a lot of times for the cars that we're going to build in-house. We put 1 set in the stages where we're fitting the sheet metal panels, aligning them side to side to make sure that we have a flush gap with the rubber in and the latch assembled. Once everything is completely in and where it needs to be, we can remove all the latches, the rubber, and then we know all of that stuff is going to fit. You could have things shifted just enough that it might be really good in this stage, but later on in the end when you go to put the rubber in, it doesn't fit. So we just are talking about all of the things that people do, putting taillights in and making sure that the gap around the taillight fits good beforehand. Like this car, we had to cut and section because these were new quarters. This thing had been sideswiped, and we had to cut and move these radiuses to get them to fit the taillights and then planish everything back out. So it's all of those details, making sure you have the stuff that you're going to use at the end. And a lot of times, it's going to fit better with the original parts versus a reproduction. If you're using a reproduction panel, know that you're going to have to cut and move and adjust body lines, all of that stuff. But again, torquing, if you're even off a little bit, you will watch, like we're working on a 47 Cadillac right now, convertible, and we've been adjusting everything back to what it needed to be initially. And what we found was if you're even 1/2 of a turn off on a bolt, even with a new body mount that we started with in the beginning, it will change your door gap because there is nothing structural about that. Again, maybe you didn't take the time to make sure your chassis was fully welded out. Again, we talk often about what welding does. It shrinks, it expands and contracts. Have everything welded on the chassis. Make sure things are square. Take the time and the attention to detail to do it in the very beginning, and as long as you do all of those crazy steps, in the end, when things go back together, it makes it way more easy. We will even take door hinges, and let's just say we talk about putting pinholes in the past videos we've done on, actually I think it was this car. It was either this one or the 55. We take just shy of an 1/8 inch drill bit and we put 2 pilot holes in all of the swinging hinges. So from the hinge to the trunk, from the hinge to the door, and on the hinge to the body side. That way everything can be put back pretty close to where it needs to be. And if you're painted and you have tracked all of these things, lithium grease on the back sides of your hinges, so that way if you got two alignment pins that get you really, really close to where it was before you disassembled the car, now you can get it to where you're just dealing with a smidget of a hair of movement to get that thing right back to aligning. Priming the car as a whole. Don't do your body work on your quarter panel separate to your trunk where everything's apart. You're going to have different shapes. The whole goal here is to lock the car in exactly as it's going to be at the end. Think about all those things you got to change, and every car is going to differ. Maybe you need a floor pan, maybe you don't. Maybe we can address, like the 61 has a toast of a good 2-foot section of the quarter panel that is just ripped, and we're going to replace it. But we don't have a chassis, so we're going to make a jig so we have everything aligned exactly in the same spot. Maybe we don't have a door on it, but be thinking about how that body is sitting in that state to make sure you get everything to line right back up where it was. Put references, put Clecos in things so that way everything lines right back up in the same spot. But do it with all of the new parts. It's not a waste of time. Don't think that you're going to gap everything with the old body mounts and then jump into it and it's going to come out perfect. Everything moves. The smallest movements make a big difference. We're over here at the 47 Cadillac project, and we're just going to show you guys real quick on how we align these hinges. If you look closely, there are two very small holes that we try to put in places that are not super visible. Obviously on this I'm limited because the bracket's so small, but the big thing is we make sure we tape the area around where this is going to go. This does not have tape underneath it, and even if you wanted to put tape underneath it, you totally can. You just have to be knowing that once you get everything mounted where it needs to be, you're going to have to one by one remove the hinge. So it doesn't make sense. We just did a rough outline and then used lithium grease on the back side. So that way we've already put the holes and you can get it right back in. So maybe you broke a drill bit that's that size. You can then use those drill bits as your alignment pins. You have to keep into consideration if you've powder coated these or if you've painted anything like this firewall, you have to re-drill them with the exact same bit that you started with in the beginning, because that little bit will hold you up. You want that thing to fit through perfectly so you can put the bolts in loose and then just give them a snug. And when you're trying to get something aligned back right to where you were after paint, we use tape a lot of times. Maybe we use a different color. Maybe we use a Sharpie where you can come in and draw around the hinge. I like using tape, and the reason is if you know that the hood maybe is good this way up and down to the top of the windshield frame, but maybe it's got to move a different direction, you can take your tape and outline which way, right? So we can do the sides so we know that we don't want maybe a side-to-side movement at all. Maybe you just want to go up or down. Then you can take your tape with a different color and put it at the bottom. Let's say you want to go up, and just give yourself a hair of a gap on the tape line. The problem is people try to align things and they just willy-nilly do it without tape. What the tape is it's a visual guide, so that way you guys can make very small increments and not just be moving. You have no clue where you're going if you're just constantly trying to adjust a door. So anytime you're doing a door, a trunk, a hood, any panel, if you use tape, Sharpies, any kind of reference that you can physically watch the hinge move very small bits at a time, you will get everything to dial in exactly where you want it as you were in the very beginning in the metal stage. The other thing you guys want to take into consideration is the weight of all the hardware that's in the door. So your windows, your window regulator, your mirrors, all of that stuff. One cool trick that you guys can do that a lot of people don't really think about is align the doors and gap them with all of the hardware in, And if you're going to be removing the hardware, so maybe you don't overspray them or whatever it may be, like these doors are gutted. But take a scale and weigh every single part, the bolts, everything that you're going to take out, and then fill. You could use this. You could even throw the parts back in the door if you're trying to gap it. As long as you have the door preloaded, because right now you can see that this door is sitting a little tiny bit high, and if you just add a little bit of pressure, it will go down and flex. So if you had everything that you gapped in the beginning with nothing in it, as soon as you put your windows, your hardware, all that stuff, your door is going to sag, and there goes your gap. So then you're coming back in at the final and you're trying to align things, you're scuffing paint, you're trying to add shims. Make sure you guys get all of these things dialed in the beginning. If you're doing this in the beginning, then you can come in and do your metal work, your welding, your edges, and fitting everything perfect. When you remove all those parts, the door should be preloaded already, so it's going to come up that little bit. Another tip for you guys is make sure every single hole, and I mean every single hole, is tapped, and use a die on all of your threaded studs to make sure everything goes back together with ease and you don't have a bolt that's going to hang you up. The last thing I'm going to end you guys with is when you bought the car, take pictures of every single area, even the areas you think are dumb, because all of those areas might have a bracket that was there that maybe at the end you can't figure out. You have to document everything. Document it after you fit it. Document it, how many shims was everything, where that bolt goes. And at the end of the day, when you put the car back together and you've got all your gaps set to 3/16, you can come back in and make sure that everything fits as tight and as perfect as possible. I hope you guys learned something good on this and it helped you guys in your project. Share what you know, continue to learn, and we'll see you guys next week.